Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Знаю.
Hare Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna. Side. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Punya Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद से अद्वैत गदाधर शिवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गो गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय वृंदावन धाम की जय नवद्वीप धाम की जय स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय गंगा माई की जय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी देवी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. My humble obeisances go to Srila Prabhupada. Your mic is muted. Kindly unmute your mic. Please unmute. Kindly unmute your mic, please.
Yeah.
Yes, it's
Oh,
okay
there
now.
we are. Okay,
Yes.
yeah. I'm very
Hare
happy. This
Krishna.
is my first visit to Africa.
Thank you. You're welcome, Maharaj.
Yeah. The flight
My humble
wasn't bad.
obeisances.
The flight was not bad at all.
Good flight.
Yeah,
So,
very, very good. First class.
yeah, I will kindly introduce your grace to the audience.
Thank you.
Then we can start. So, my dear devotees, we are very fortunate to have His Grace Brahma Prabhu, who is a direct disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Brahma Prabhu is a board member at Krishna House, a senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada, a professional mediator and an advisor for the EPA, and the director of the City of Gunnesville Planning Board. His initial conversation with Srila Prabhupada were recorded and later published in a book entitled Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. And this book has been making many devotees across West Africa and across the world as a whole. So we are fortunate to hear from him his experiences and realizations from Srila Prabhupada. So Maharaj, you are welcome once again to this platform. And we hope this will not be the last you will come to Africa to preach to us. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege. My good friend Ritavaja Swami was scheduled, but he has to speak at a funeral service, which of course
Yes.
We
Yes,
can't
he said
schedule
so.
these things. So he asked me to attend. And I've always had some great interest in visiting Africa. One of my good friends was Brahmananda Swami, who initiated a lot of the activities in Africa in the early days. And when Prabhupada visited Africa, I was just reading the stories of it in Shama Sundar's Chasing the Rhino book. And Prabhupada was very concerned that the devotees were only reaching out to the Indian community and not the African community. And the devotees felt, we can't really reach out to the African community. They're not very interested. And Prabhupada told them, just start chanting. So Shama Sundar says they went on the street, and that was right after there was some rebellion in Kenya. So he was very scared to go. There was a lot of anti-Western sentiment because Kenya recently had become independent and chased the British out. So he was afraid of being a Westerner going there. And instead, the reception of the devotees chanting on the street was so positive. And then the whole temple just filled up, but it filled up with Africans, not Indians who had taken residence. And Prabhupada was so pleased because he said he saw that the African people have a certain appreciation of nature, certain appreciation of demigods. They understand there's a higher controller. There was so many factors favorable for Krishna consciousness, and the devotees' own fear prevented them from reaching out. And Prabhupada cut through that within 2 minutes. And then everything changed. Then one of my best friends was Bhakti Tirtha Swami. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami told me about his adventures in Africa, especially the time he became a tribal chief in Nigeria,
Yes.
and which never happens to African Americans, never happens. But he was so respected, and he was on the way to the function. And there were 2 cars going, and while on the way there, a truck veered out of its lane and crashed into him, trying to kill him. And he was bloodied, but not seriously injured. So the devotee said, we're going to take you to a hospital. And he said, no, I must go now in the other car, because if I show up, they'll know that I'm protected by higher authority and no one will bother me again. And if I don't show up, they'll try to kill me again. And he was so brave in what he did. He told me the story. We were sitting under a waterfall together, just as we say in America, chilling out. And he told me that story. So we find in America there is significant racial prejudice. It's part of the American scene. We began that way. And I've studied this phenomena a lot, and it's a sad phenomena. And when the devotees first went to Africa, even though we know we're not this body, some of these prejudices were probably carried through. I can say without a doubt. And then Prabhupada arrived on the scene and said, this is absolutely nonsense. We're here with some of the most wonderful people. You give them Krishna. And culturally, Africa is different than the West, just as China is different than the West, and India is quite different. So there's a great cultural diversity. But earlier in this chapter, we're going to be speaking from, Prabhupada said, when there's a fire, the fire brigade forms. And even though everyone speaks different languages, they all cooperate together to carry the buckets of water to put out the fire. So similarly, there may be some cultural differences between India and Africa and America and China, etc. But we're all above the body working together for a common mission. So for me to visit Africa after all of these years and all of I've heard is just saying it's a great privilege for me. And I'm so happy to be there. And like I said, the flight was quite nice.
Thank you, Maharaj. We put the verse on the screen for today's verse.
Yeah,
So we can start.
please do. And give me a screen sharing capability if you don't mind.
Okay, I'll do it now.
Yeah. And how many people? We have 9 people here. Are other
Many people are still coming. Maybe they will come later. They will come after, but many people will come also.
Okay. So Africa works the same way as India. We call it India stretch time.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now I
That's
give you
fine.
sharing right. You
Okay.
can share screen.
Okay. The next question I have is if I like an interactive class. So some people are watching on YouTube. Is that correct?
Yes, you are live now on YouTube also.
If people put any questions in the chat on YouTube, can you transfer it to the Zoom chat?
Yes, I'll do that. No
Okay,
problem.
because the way I typically give class is quite interactive. And so, my relationship with Prabhupada when I was with him was always to ask a lot of questions. So to carry on that tradition, I like when people ask questions or make comments because we all, I may right now be sitting in the teacher's seat, but we all learn together. And I learned from you, you learned from me. And so it's a lot more fun class when we all learn together.
Yes,
I
Maharaj.
like you, Kusha does. I like your background.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Where is that?
That is in Egypt.
I look like the desert in Egypt. That's a good. My computer doesn't let me do that. It's too old for that. Okay, so we can bring the verse up.
Yes,
And if
Maharaj.
you see me looking away, I have information on my other screen.
We have the verse now on the screen.
Okay, good. Why don't you chant the verse for me? My voice comes and goes, so I'll preserve some voice if you don't mind.
Yes, Maharaj. Gyanam gunyatamam yat tat saksat bhagavato ditam anva vocham gamishyanta kripaya dinavatsala. Maharaj, can you now read word-to-word translation?
You go ahead, please. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay. Gyanam, knowledge. Guyatama, most confidential. Yat, what is. That. Sakshat, directly. Bhagavata Uditam, propounded by the Lord himself. And Vavucha, gave instruction. Gamisyanta, while departing from. Krepaya, by costless mercy. Dina Vatsalaha, those who are very kind to the poor and meek. Translation. Maharaj, do I go on?
I'll take over from here.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay. As they were leaving, those Bhaktivedantas who were very kind to the poor-hearted souls instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself. We'll do some of the purport. But first, as a context, in this particular chapter, in this particular chapter, Narada Muni is instructing Vedavyas because Vedavyas got a little depressed. All of us sometimes get depressed. And Narada Muni was asking him, why are you depressed? Did you insult a woman? Did you insult Brahmins? What did you do? Because typically Vaishnav gets depressed when he can't do his service. And Vyas didn't know what he did. Couldn't figure out. But I know I didn't do any of these things. I was nice to everybody. I'm a nice guy. Come on. I'm Veda Vyas. I'm a really nice guy. Occasionally, I do some weird things, but other than that, it was all for Krishna's service. So what's the problem? And then Narada Muni tells him, the problem is you danced around the essence. You've combined, wrote the 4 Vedas. You compiled it, not wrote, compiled it. You put it all together, but you missed the essence of it all. And if you miss the essence, everyone's going to become bewildered. Well, at that point, Veda Vyas is shocked, as if I walked up to you and let's say, it reminds me of a story that happened to Burijan Prabhu. Many of you know him, one of the most wonderful, intelligent disciples of Prabhupada. So Burijan was an early pioneer in Hong Kong. And he was there for a long time, basically alone with his wife, no one else, just hardly any visitors. And one time, Tulsi worship was introduced in the movement. So somebody mailed him Tulsi seeds. And he planted the Tulsi seeds, and the plant grew. And every day he would dance around Tulsi, Yani, Kani, like that, and offer the worship to Tulsi. But still, in the core of his heart, the devotional service wasn't working well. He was getting very concerned. Maybe I shouldn't be in Hong Kong, though Prabhupada told me to be here. Things are not working well. What's wrong? Finally, a devotee visitor shows up, and they do the morning program, and he brings out Tulsi for Tulsi worship. And devotee says, what are you doing? He says, we're doing Tulsi worship. He goes, where's Tulsi? Here. That's not Tulsi. The whole time, the Tulsi never grew. A weed had grown. And Burijan thought that was Tulsi Devi. So the whole time he was dancing around a weed, Yani, Kani, Chapapani, the whole thing. But it wasn't Tulsi. So he was wondering why his devotional service, what was wrong? Because the weed had grown and he was worshiping the weed. So these things happen. So in a similar way, Narada Muni was kind of, he was worshiping
Vyasadeva.
Not Narada Muni. Vyasadeva was worshiping a weed in that he was worshiping, he was talking about karma kanda, which helps us raise our consciousness. I mean, these things happen. So there's something nice to be said about karma kanda, but it's not the essence of devotional service. It doesn't satisfy our inner self. And if we're really a devotee, karma kanda will make us very depressed. I'll tell you a story about that, which you all might like. Let me see if I can find the photo to go with it. Some years ago, about 3 years ago, a wonderful devotee at Krishna House in Gainesville decided she met a wonderful man. Now, this devotee, Tulsi Rani, comes from a Jewish family, and her father had died, but her father always wanted her to have a Jewish wedding. Meanwhile, her husband was an Indian birth from Singapore, from a Christian family, and they were both initiated devotees. And they decided to have their wedding at New Raman Reti, which is a nice place for it. But they wanted to do something unusual in a wedding, very unusual. They wanted the wedding to be a Vedic Jewish wedding. Now that is definitely unusual. A wedding in which the bride and groom are married in a combination Vedic ceremony, Jewish ceremony, right at New Raman Reti, the devotee community in Alachua, because she wanted to please her mother and in memory of her father. So being from a Jewish family, I portrayed the role of the rabbi, and the wonderful Chaturapma did the Vedic part of it. And I didn't know what would happen to me showing up in rabbinical gear at New Ramanreti, but the devotees loved it. And I studied quite a bit before the wedding. And like in the Jewish ceremony, there are 7 blessings. In the Hindu ceremony, there are 7 steps. And when I was done preparing for the ceremony, I came to an amazing conclusion, because something about the weddings we do in ISKCON had bothered me. And when I studied the Jewish wedding, I realized most of the Jewish wedding was focused on what can you do for God. And most of the so-called Vedic ceremony was, what can God do for us? I want this blessing. I want a blessing of a house. I want blessing of children. I want this. I want that. It was what I want. And the Jewish was what I give. And I was bewildered because I thought we sort of had the better message. So right after the wedding, the very night of the wedding, I had to fly to New York for a meeting at the Bhakti Center there. I serve on that board. And when I got there, I saw Radhanath Swami, and he had heard about the wedding. So I heard you married my disciple. I said, yes, Maharaj. But I like the Jewish ceremony better than our so-called Vedic. He goes, of course. The Vedic ceremony that we do is all karma kanda. It's karma kanda stuff. So my depression at that ceremony was similar to Vedavyas's depression. Karma kanda doesn't satisfy us. Karma kanda meaning doing good deeds to get good results. See, when I first went to India, I went to India in 1971. I had been attracted to India since I was a little boy. And then in high school and college, I read the Gita several times, not Prabhupada's, it wasn't out yet, Franklin Edgerton's and Radhakrishnan's, which Prabhupada said he did a good translation and horrible purports. And in that time, there were a lot of gurus. After Prabhupada, gurus were coming every week to New York City. And one of the newspapers, their big joke was a centerfold, a picture of the guru that arrived that week. And some of them were sincere. Most were really weirdos, to be absolutely frank. You know, Rajneesh had 60 Rolls Royces, and, you know, another one, rub your eyeballs, which any of us can do. And you see an optic nerve flashes white light. And he would say, that is the white light of the Brahman. And then he spoke from the Gita very eloquently. I heard him speak live one time. He spoke very eloquently from the Gita. And he said, and you must surrender to Krishna. That's what the Gita is saying. I said, this is very good. And then at the end, he goes, and I am Krishna. I mean, he was a, you know, kind of a fat slob. If that's Krishna, there was no beauty associated with him. He was just overweight, ate too much, and was obnoxious. And that's not the Krishna who I wanted to love. And there's more to that story, but we'll leave that in case there's some questions. So I really want to go to India to find out who's real and who's not real in terms of guru. So I joined the American Peace Corps, and I got assigned to a village very remote, but the closest assignment to Calcutta, very, very remote in what's called the Adivasi area, Indian tribals. And the Indian tribals were very much like the American Indians. They worship the sun god and get drunk once a week. And it was I said, gee, I've seen this before. And very nice people. So I was assigned to a school there, and I would go around to temples, mosques, churches. We had all the religions in that area. And I would ask this question: why are you here? And I knew enough Hindi to communicate. Tell me why you are here. Can anyone guess what the answer was that I was most often given?
They said they come to ask for the benediction of God.
What did they specifically ask for, you think?
I think prosperity in their businesses. In
Say-
India,
yeah.
prosperity in their businesses.
Yeah.
And in India, the men normally pray for their daughters to have a good husband.
Yeah. They would pray for something material. For example, it was like Amazon.com. How does Amazon, you have Amazon in Africa?
I think so, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I would imagine so. They're every place. And the way it works with Amazon is you give them your credit card, and the next day at your door arrives a new toaster or whatever you want.
Yes.
And similarly, that's what it was like when I went to the temples. It was like a big Amazon. This predated Amazon. People would go offer some coins, some prayers. Sometimes they'd cut off their hair and offer it. They'd do some offering, and the next day they expected, rain, a dowry, whatever they wanted. It was like a big Amazon.com. You make it, you give them something, you get something in return. In other words, it was all karma kanda. I was very turned off by that. Because I said, I went all the way to India. I lived very austere. My assignment there was considered one of the worst assignments in the world. It was so austere. And so I lived very austere, had to put up with what we used to call Delhi belly. I mean, you all know what I mean by that. And, I didn't have electricity, maybe an hour a day, not running water. I mean, it was austere. I was 22, so it wasn't a big deal. But I said, I went all the way here just to see karma kanda. I was very unimpressed. Then I was in Calcutta one time, and I saw a sign, Hare Krishna Festival. And I went to the festival. And there was a very fancy part, Deshpande Park, I think it's called. And at that festival, Giriraj Brahmachari was speaking. And he was speaking so eloquently, so brilliantly. As the first time for the months I'd been in India, I heard anyone make sense philosophically. I said, wow. And I can still remember the talk from, 49 years ago. And, I can hardly remember what I had for breakfast today, let alone a talk from 49 years ago. And it was so impressive. And then I said, maybe these people have the answer. And I started visiting the temple. Whenever I was in Calcutta, I would visit the temple. And fortunately, I got to meet Prabhupada and all. And so this was my release from the all-pervasive karma kanda of India, which was really very disappointing to me. I didn't go to India to get learn about karma kanda. So now this takes us back to the verse we're dealing with.
It's back on the screen.
Yeah, thank you. A pure Vedantis or Bhakti Vedanta instructs followers according to the instructions of the Lord himself. The personality of Godhead, both in the Gita and other scriptures, has definitely instructed men to follow the Lord only. The Lord is a creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. When I heard that in India, the first time presented by devotees, I was ecstatic. I said, yes, that makes sense. They weren't saying the Lord is our order supplier. And the religious background I came from, even though theoretically people talked about worshiping God, but in the Judeo-Christian world of America, God was mostly seen as the order supplier. Of course, now he's been replaced by Amazon. The whole manifested creation is existing by his will. And by his will, when the whole show is finished, he remains in his eternal abode. And we'll skip ahead a little. In the Gita, the Lord says that long before the instruction was imparted to Arjuna, the same instruction was imparted to the sun god. And in course of time, the same instruction being wrongly handled and being broken was again instructed to Arjuna. Now, this is a very, very important point, because in the Gita, Krishna says the science was lost. And at the time Krishna spoke 5,000 years ago, the science was lost. In other words, Krishna is saying, this is not Vedic times. Sometimes devotees feel if we read the Mahabharata, we'll understand Vedic times. But that's the opposite of what Krishna says. Krishna is saying, no, the science was lost. I've come here to give it back. These are not Vedic times. So we have to be careful to not read more into what Krishna is saying. Now I'm going to jump ahead. The expression most confidential is significant here because knowledge of devotional service is far, far above knowledge of impersonal Brahman. Remember, Krishna says in the Gita, Raja Vidya, Raja Guyam. This is the king of all knowledge, but it's secret. Now, what does Krishna mean when he says it's secret? I can read it. Anybody can go to the library. There's 500 English editions of the Gita, and so many in every language. So you can pick up a Gita and read it. How is it confidential? Interesting question. It's confidential because you can't really understand it unless you also cultivate humility. Without humility, it's just we're not able to see it. I'll give an example. I'm a geologist. Now, to my wife's sometimes concern, when we're driving along a highway, we're on a roadway, and the roadway is cut through a mountain. I have to pull the car over, even if it's not safe, to look at the rocks, because I'm a geologist. And when I look at the rocks, I see so many things other people don't see. I see the history. Oh, this used to be a deep ocean, and then it was faulted, and then it was folded, and here's some fossils, and here's a metamorphic intrusion. I mean, just my training. So I see these things because I've been trained in it. Similarly, if we want to understand the most confidential knowledge, we need training. And to get training means we have to have humility to say, I don't know everything. When I went to grad school, if I said, oh, I knew everything, the instructors would have thrown me out. I said, no, I don't know. I want to learn. Therefore, with that humility, I became a good student and learned a lot. The same process. It's not unusual. So, when such knowledge is turned into pure devotional service and the confidential part of transcendental knowledge is attained, it is called the most confidential knowledge. And this confidential knowledge was imparted by the Lord to Brahma, Arjuna, Uddhava, etc. And the next verse, by that confidential knowledge, I can understand clearly the influence of Lord Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him. I was with Prabhupada at Nutalavan. And of course, this is Narada Muni speaking. And Prabhupada gave this incredible talk. He said, if you chant your rounds and follow the principles, you will go back to Godhead this life. And he said, I am not complimenting you. I am just repeating what Krishna said. I'm telling you what Krishna said. It was very dramatic. There's a famous picture there that's in many devotee kitchens of Prabhupada cooking on this white stove. He was cooking some eggplant dish. Somehow or other, my hand was in the right place and I got a piece of it. I can still taste it. It was quite good. So I was lucky to have my hand in the right place at the right time. I'm going to stop here and ask, are there any questions on the YouTube chat or on this chat, or any comments or any reflections on something I said that you'd like to comment on or like me to speak on? Sahadev Prabhu.
Sadev, please.
Thank you so much. We're very happy to have you today. Well, I have a couple of questions for you, Prabhuji. Are you in Florida or in Georgia?
I'm in Florida, Gainesville, where we have the famous Krishna lunch. For 49 years, we've been serving 1,000 plates a day to the students on the campus. They recently named where we serve Krishna Lunch Lane. The campus did.
Very good reviews.
Yes.
That's very good.
Yeah.
My first question has to do with Krishna and Arjuna. Krishna again giving the similar lost knowledge to Arjuna, and you said it was confidential. No, until recently we didn't have anything like Alexa, whereby they would snoop into our conversation. And we know the Bhagavad Gita was not written by either Krishna or Arjuna. It is Sanjaya who spoke it to Dhritarashtra. Now, how do we know, how do we believe that Sanjaya told Dhritarashtra exactly what he heard Krishna and Arjuna's conversation was?
Yeah, go on. Dave, you asked a very good question, a very insightful question, a very important question. How do we know? This is the real question. I'm going to take your question to another level. So your question is, how do we know what we know?
Okay.
And that's called the science in philosophy. That's called epistemology. How do we know what we know? So the Vedas have an epistemology, a science of knowing how we know what we know. I mean, the great philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, etc., all talked about this subject. It's a very important subject. Sometimes devotees really know the philosophy, but not philosophy. And Prabhupada wanted his disciples to learn philosophy. In fact, when he visited Kenya, he had some time. And during that time, he had Shamasundar going through all the philosophers, beginning with the pre-Socratics up to modern, and asking him questions for the dialectical spiritualism project. And Prabhupada wanted his disciples not to know just the philosophy, but philosophy. So if you asked a philosophical question, a very good one, very, very important. The epistemology of the Vedas is we learn from higher authority. So we have a parampara. So through that parampara, we can understand things. I'll give you an example that puts it in context. Take the Mahabharata. How many of you think the Mahabharata is a historical representation of what happened? And how many think it's not? Anybody? It's not. I'll give you the answer. The answer is both. According to the modern scholars such as Dimak, who wrote the preface to one of the editions of the Gita, and according to Madhavacharya, the Bhagavatam is wholesale corrupt. That's Madhavacharya's words. Wholesale corrupt. The Bhagavatam, not the Bhagavatam, I said the Bhagavatam is not wholesale corrupt. The Mahabharata is wholesale corrupt. Mahabharata, wholesale corrupt. In other words, it's been changed and twisted and done. There are a few sections that are well preserved, like the Gita and the Bhishma Gita. There's a few sections in there that, according to the acharyas and scholars, are well preserved. The Bhagavatam is different. The Bhagavatam is much better preserved. because it wasn't the big popular text of the Mahabharata that kings who didn't like some of the stories would change it. That's historically known. So when devotees try to learn what Vedic culture is from the Mahabharata, it's a poor source. Krishna says in the Mahabharata, in the Gita section, the science was lost. And the scholars and Madhvacharya both say we have a problem with it. Now, right now, some devotees are doing efforts led by Hridayananda Maharaj to do a translation of the Mahabharata based on the Bhagavatam. See, many of the stories of the Mahabharata are in the Bhagavatam. So his criteria is, if it's in the Bhagavatam, I accept it as so. If it's not in the Bhagavatam, then we have to be careful. Is it really so? So we accept things by disciplic succession, but according to Jiva Goswami, we also accept the evidence of our senses. So I'll give an example. We observe that when people follow the regulative principles, they're happier. We can see that it's practical. What Prabhupada, when I'm in by the University of Florida, and the mascot, all American teams have some animal mascot, a rattlesnake, a fish, or whatever. So the University of Florida mascot is an alligator, because we're in Florida and every lake has alligators in it. Not quite crocodiles, but alligators. They don't eat grown-ups, they only eat children. According to the alligators I've talked to, they said they're quite delicious, but that's another matter. The Florida team is called the Gators, short for alligator. And because the football team is quite successful, 100,000 people come out to each game and is a very enthusiastic crowd. And so everyone is in the mood on campus they're always chanting, "Go Gators, go Gators." So I've asked students, I say, okay, I want you to chant 5 minutes, no longer, Hare Krishna for 1 week. 5 minutes, no longer. The following week, I want you to chant "Go Gators" for 5 minutes. Nobody's ever succeeded. Everyone chants Hare Krishna more than 5 minutes, and "Go Gators" after 2 days, they never want to hear it again, because there is a transcendental vibration. So we know from parampara, a descending knowledge, and then we know from our own experience that it works. So this is a balance. And so therefore, we can understand the truth of the Gita by parampara and by our own experience and realizations. It's a combination thereof. So when I read the Gita, yeah, I believe it's what Sanjay said. Recently, Hridayananda Maharaj did a new translation of the Gita. Prabhupada had encouraged his disciples to do multiple editions. He had specifically given that instruction in a letter. So he translated the Gita in an interesting way. Of course, he has a PhD in Sanskrit. He translated it in a very literal way. See, Prabhupada put purports into the verses. So when he translated it, he would translate it more to get the point across, which is absolutely what was necessary to do and the right thing to do. But sometimes devotees said, what would it be like if I was Sanjay listening? What would it sound like in English? So he did that in English. It took him a long time. Very literal translation, but in flowing English, so that when you read it, you can feel like what it's like to hear Sanjay. And when I read Prabhupada's Gita, I get great realizations. I mean, because it's so deep. And when I read Maharaj's Gita, I say, wow, just the translations, this is really fascinating. This 30-minute existential crisis has everything in it. So there are different ways to look at it. So I hope that answers your very important question, Sahadev. Very, very important.
The second part to that is, since that conversation was confidential, how did it leak to Sanjaya, who wasn't there present?
You asked another good question. How did the conversation leak to Sanjaya? Well, Sanjaya had a mystical ability. So he could hear things at a distance, just like nowadays, like Zoom. So I'm hearing what you're saying in Africa, but I'm sitting here. So Sanjay had, you might say, he had transcendental Zoom. Yeah, and so he could hear precisely what was being said. And now, the confidential part isn't that it's a secret, like I whisper, hey, Kusha, I got some gossip for you. You know,
I need one now.
yeah, it's not that kind of confidential. Rather, it's confidential in that unless you have a humble state, it's right in front of you and you can't see it. It's confidential like the nose on your face. It's right there, but you can't see it unless you got one of these really extra large ones. But we'll leave that aside. You have to, you know, somebody has like a beak or something, but unless somebody has like a super extra large, really extra large, they don't see the nose on their face, though it's right there. If you go to a mirror, you could confirm it, but you don't see it. So similarly, you need the eyes to see it. That's the confidential part. Not that it's like, hey, Kusha, did you hear this about Sahadev? That's a different kind of confidential.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Maharaj, I have one question for you.
Yes, Prabhu.
In the course of your lecture, you give example of your experiences with Vedic wedding and Jewish wedding.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that the Vedic wedding is Kamakanda. So that,
not all of them, but many of I've been to look very Karmakanda to me. One evidence is they go on too long.
So as devotees, how do we really change things like this? Because we are supposed to preach about pure devotional service to help the disciples to attain Krishna. If we are performing Kamakanda in the wedding, could it be the reason many couples are so attached to their married life after 40 years? They don't take Vanaprastha.
Yeah, well, you know, Kusha, you asked two good questions. What do we do about it? I don't have the answer, but we need to think about it deeply. What do we want to do? You know, Prabhupada went to Vrindavan in his first visit back with his Western disciples, and it was a big deal for him to have Western disciples coming in, you know, doing kirtan down the streets of Vrindavan. They'd never seen such a sight, nor imagined it was even possible. The mayor of Vrindavan greeted him. This, you know, humble sadhu from Radha Damodar temple had huge success in the West. The Beatles were singing his mantra. Beatles, the most famous people in the world. They're singing his mantra, all these things going on. They were amazed. And Prabhupada's first words when he spoke to the assembled citizens of Vrindavan were, I did not go to the West to make Hindus. Very dramatic. He said, whatever religion you have, I want you to add Krishna. Now, those of us from whatever religion we're from, Jewish, Christian, Islam, whatever, you know, we basically, for more or less, dropped that just to serve Prabhupada, which, you know, if I had to do it again, I would do the same thing over and over again. To me, there's no doubt about that. At the same time, Prabhupada's message wasn't sectarian, and certainly wasn't that we should become Hindus. Prabhupada said about the Hindus in 1960s and 70s something very interesting. He said they are one step from Krishna, one step facing the wrong way. And he said, in that time, the Westerners, the Americans at that time. He said, we're 10 steps from Krishna, facing the right way. So now things might have changed since then. But at that time, spiritual seeking in the West, when Prabhupada came in 65, I was there, it was very prominent, very prominent. If Prabhupada had come in 64, he never would have been successful. He would have been thrown out. Something changed around that time. If he had come later, he would have missed the peak. Krishna had him arrive almost to the day, the perfect time to come to the West. And Prabhupada didn't know that. When he got off the gangplank in his diary, he said, I didn't know if I should turn left or I should turn right. He didn't know. He went to Butler, Pennsylvania, where he had a family host, and he would go to the library and study America to figure out, what is this crazy place about? And then when the opportunity came for him to go to New York City, which at that point was the capital of the world, it used to be London, and had basically shifted to New York, he went there at the right time, and he went to the Lower East Side, which was the right place. And the rest, as we say, is history. So should we do a wedding that's meaningful, but not too Hindu, but within our tradition? A really good question. I don't know the answer to that. So we have to study this. Yeah, every one of us needs rituals. We need a ritual to get married. We need a ritual when a child's born. We need a ritual for death. We need these things. These things are very important for human culture. We all desperately need it. And in other words, we need a little religion in our life besides spirituality. We all need it. So the question is, how do we introduce it without becoming over Hindu? It's a tough question, and it's something we all have to work on. I mean, people are, people smarter than me are thinking about this a lot. Does that answer your question, Kusha Prabhu?
Yes, Maharaj, I have another question.
Yes.
I want to know, how were you able to be fully convinced and believe in Prabhupada? Because your interview with Prabhupada that translated into perfect question and perfect answers.
Yeah.
Those days, how do you feel? How do you meet Prabhupada that you ask such question that becomes a book? Because it wasn't planned by Prabhupada.
Prabhuji, may I continue with that, because I had a similar question. Because
go on.
As I read, I gave class one time on this forum, and I was asked to recommend books for new aspirants, and that was one of the books I recommended. And I am just amazed as to how you were able to ask such intelligent questions at such a young age. So that connects to Kusha Prabhu's question, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Well, I'll tell you the inner story. By the way, how much time do I have? I want to be respectful of your time.
We have until 5 hours. No problem. When you are tired, we close.
Okay.
We want to follow the stages of Namisaranya. We are never tired of hearing.
Okay. Okay. We'll go on. My goal is when people start falling asleep, I know it's over. Once I gave a class at Krishna House, and one young man who had recently joined said, I really loved your class. And I said, Prabhu, what did you like about it? And he gave me the biggest compliment I'd ever received after giving a class. This is a compliment so rare that maybe none of us will get it within our lifetime.
Wow.
Would you like to know the compliment?
Yes.
He said, I didn't fall asleep once.
That's a good one. Yes.
I was at a class once, I won't say who was giving it, and I watched the speaker fall asleep. He goes, and Krishna is. And I said, something profound is coming. And then nothing came. And he spoke in a monotone, and everyone else had already fallen asleep. So I was the only one who noticed it. Anyway, that's another story. So let me see. I was very fortunate growing up. I had a disability, and I was very fortunate. I'm legally blind in one eye, and I was operated on when I was a little boy, and the doctor made it worse. So if you have vision in one eye, that means we don't have depth perception. And if we don't have depth perception, we can't catch a ball. To this day, if you throw me your keys, I cannot catch it because I don't have depth perception. I can drive. I never hit anybody. I even flew an airplane. I can do a lot of things because I can compensate. But as a boy, I couldn't do what everyone else would do, play ball. So because I couldn't play ball, I would hide out in the woods to get away from everybody. And there was a forest behind my house. And I'd go in the forest. I got to know every tree, and I would just think about death all the time, maybe from previous life. What is death? It dawned on me that no one can ever really die, but people are dying. And I couldn't, that mystery haunted me. Maybe haunt is the wrong word, but anyway, it haunted me. You know, how is it people are dying, but no one can really die? I knew no one could die, but people were dying. So then I started reading philosophy books. And because I wasn't very social, I had a lot of time. I wasn't playing ball or things to read and study. And then in college, I read the Gita, and I was just fascinated by it. So I said, I'm going to India to find the root of it. So by the time I got to India, even though I was only 22, I had spent 10 years thinking and reading about these topics. And if I had normal eyes, that never would have happened to me. So if I had to do it over again, I'd probably have to poke out one eye to make that work. But it was the best thing that could happen. Then when I went to India, I really wanted to find out what the roots of the Krishna movement were. I heard the devotees chanting. In fact, the devotee that was chanting in 68, the first time I saw the mantra, was a kirtan party led by Jayadvaita Swami. You all know Jayadvaita Swami. In fact, he's arriving today to stay with me for 2 months.
Oh, he's giving class here on Christmas Day, 25th December, 5 days time.
I'll be with him when he gives a class.
He has been giving
no, I
class
won't.
here.
I'm visiting my grandkids that day. Okay, but we just got a new facility. You know, I'm the director of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. So we just got donated a new facility in Gainesville, right near the campus. You can see it here. That used to be the house for the president of the university. And I'm frantically fixing it up, and Jayadvaita Swami is going to be our first guest.
Yeah.
For the Bhaktivedanta Institute. We'll have a library of 3,000 books. It's quite a facility. Just because, you know, I was one of the good fortune to be one of the original members of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. There's me in the middle, 1977, in the Life Comes from Life conference in Vrindavan, Damodar Maharaj, Sadaputa. And here.
Maharaj, can you share the first picture again, please? And the second one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is the new headquarters for the Bhaktivedanta Institute in Gainesville.
Okay.
It's nice.
Quite a nice place. And the second picture is here. This is called Changing Body Exhibit. You all know the Changing Body Exhibit. So
yes.
That's my body from a long time ago.
It's hard to trace.
You know, I actually had hair then. See, if I would,
on the top is written 1977, Life Comes from Life picture.
Yes. And that was in Vrindavan at our first international conference on Life Comes from Life, right before Prabhupada was in Vrindavan then. He couldn't attend the conference, but every night we'd go and give him our Sankirtan scores. Then we did a conference 2 years ago, following the same mood that Prabhupada had. Prabhupada said, he sent out a letter, send me all your PhDs and scientists. There were 5 of us. So I did an appeal a few years ago, and we put on a conference. Here's the number of devotees that showed up. So you see, we have a lot more, and we had 5 PhDs from Russia come, and so we had quite a crowd. Almost every continent but Africa was represented, and so I am anxious to get in contact with the devotee scientists and philosophers in Africa. It's the only continent that I didn't have contact with yet. So you know them, you send them my way. I'll put, just to share the final picture I queued up. This was a conference we did in 2019. 450 people came to opening night. The mayor did the presentation to open the conference. We had very famous non-devotee speakers and many devotee speakers, and that's how Prabhupada wanted us to do it. So I am going to put in the chat the link for the Bhaktivedanta Institute, and if somebody has some question, I'll put my email, which is really easy. It's just my name at IVS, which is Institute for Vaishnava Studies.edu. So to go circle back to your question, repeat your question one more time and make sure I get it right.
How you were able to be inspired to ask such questions when you met Prabhupada?
Yeah, well, I explained the 10 years that I had been in a meditative mood. And then when I met Prabhupada, I said, there's a verse in the Gita that says, just approach a spiritual master, inquire submissively. The spiritual master can give you the truth because he knows it, to paraphrase a verse. So I was in Calcutta and I ran into some devotees, said, we're doing food relief for Bangladesh refugees. So I said, in Mayapur, I didn't know what a Mayapur was, but I said, sure, I'll go. So I went up there to help with food relief. It was right after a war with Pakistan, so many, many refugees. And Prabhupada, they just bought the land in Mayapur. So the only building there was Prabhupada's Bhajan Kutir, which I think you're all familiar with, but I'll share it with you. Here it is. This is the Bhajan Kutir of Prabhupada in Mayapur. It was the only building there. Chutananda had built it for him. There were no buildings. We had only tents to stay in. It was very austere. There was nothing to buy. There were no merchants, but we were serving, and I was glad to do that. So I went there to help out. And then what was I doing? Well, there was 60, 70 devotees there and one guest, one English-speaking guest. A few villagers had come, but there were no guests at all, just devotees and one guest. Can you think who the guest might have been?
One devotee and one guest?
No, there was 60, 70 devotees and one English-speaking guest. Who was that English-speaking guest?
It's you. You are the guest.
Yes, that was me. That was me. And every devotee, and devotees were very young, average age like 22 maybe, which means a lot of them were 18 years old. And they're very enthusiastic to preach. And there was one person to preach to. One. And so Prabhupada kept me in his hut with him all day. He was protecting me. And I approached him according to that verse of the Gita. I said, look, I don't know if Prabhupada is a Jagat Guru or whatever, but his disciples are so smart and well behaved, and his books are so impressive. I said, I'm not here to challenge him. I'm here to learn from him. And later on, I can contemplate and see if I agree or disagree. But in my mind, I made up, I'm not going to challenge anything. I'm just going to ask. And so what was I doing? I was inquiring submissively, and I was rendering service. Well, that's what Krishna says is a formula in the Gita. So quite by accident, I hit the correct formula of the Gita. And Prabhupada kept me with him for 3 days all day. But something changed in the conversation. On the Gaur Purnima night, this was the first Gaur Purnima festival, on the full moon night, and we didn't have electricity. A generator would give a little bit of light, but there was no electricity. And the wonderful, wonderful Yamuna was there. The Yamuna who sings Govinda prayers every morning. So after many hours of conversing with Prabhupada, it was in the evening of Gaur Purnima, Yamuna walks up to me, and I can see tears in her eyes from the moonlight. And she says to me, you are so fortunate. Prabhupada's giving you every minute. See, I was the last devotee up until maybe Bhakti True Swami, because by then the movement was so large that it wasn't like 1966 or 67 where Prabhupada would personally make each devotee. It was too large, with thousands and hundreds temples. It was too big. So I was the last one to actually get a lot of one-on-one time until Bhakti True Swami came along in 77. And so she was telling me how fortunate I was to get all that time with Prabhupada. And she said it with such love and such conviction that it shocked me. And after she walked away with the tears glowing the moonlight, it impacted me deeply. And I walked into the rice fields. They were dry that time of year, behind the pandal. And I just collapsed and started crying and crying. And I'm not much of a crier. So that was unusual, because I was thinking, here I am asking theoretical questions, but now it's becoming about me personally, and I'm not ready to surrender to this. I'm still thinking. So the next day, Prabhupada called me in to see him. And I said, thank you so much for giving me a chance to ask these questions, but I have to leave now to go back to my teaching assignment. Now, as an aside, my teaching assignment was to train high school teachers. And nobody knew what I was doing. I was so remote, the Peace Corps management would never visit me. I was too hard to get to, and they're lazy bums. So they would never come see me. And nobody knew what I was doing, and nobody cared. I just do what I wanted. So nevertheless, I sort of made an excuse. I said, I have to leave now. I have to go back to my assignment. And then Prabhupada said magic words. He said exactly this. He said, do not talk L-E-A-V-E, leave. Talk L-I-V-E, live. And I said, you want me to stay longer? And he goes, yes. I said, oh, then I'll stay.
Wow.
And he says, and then he said to me, any of you have a dog, you know these words. And he said to me, the words you say to your dog when your dog behaves. He said, good boy. At that moment, I knew in my heart I was Prabhupada's dog. And the whole conversation changed from hypothetical to personal. So that's how it happened. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, Maharaj, very nice. Thank you very much. And we see how so many questions. Everybody here, we ask one question.
Okay. Do you want me to turn on, should I turn on my YouTube to see it myself or not? Or you
if you want to see YouTube, it's going on YouTube also.
Okay, let me, if you put the link in the chat, I'll put,
okay,
I'll send screens.
Okay, I'll send you the link now.
Yeah, because I have 2 screens, so I can look at the other screen and see it.
Okay, I'm coming now.
Even though I only have one eye, I have 2 screens. Go figure.
Utpala Prabhu has a question. Utpala, please ask your question. Unmute yourself.
Did you ask me to ask question?
Yes.
Yeah, go on.
This is very great because I did not raise my hand, but in my heart, I was really happy and thinking I should ask question. But I didn't raise my hand, and now I am called upon to say something.
Ask your question.
I don't have question, but to appreciate Maharaj, to thank him very much for coming on this platform. And I want to say that Srila Prabhupada was a great gift to the world, but in extension, I think all his disciples are wonderful people and great gifts to the whole world. But unfortunately, some people are trying to destroy this beautiful world with COVID-19 and other things bringing up. So hopefully, Srila Prabhupada's disciples will continue to do good work to inspire devotees, to enlighten them, to give them Krishna consciousness, and to give them faith in Krishna and Krishna consciousness. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you. Maharaj, I have posted the link on the chat. The last one is YouTube.
I don't see any questions in YouTube. I just turned it on, but maybe because I joined late, they don't show. You may have to repaste the questions into the Zoom chat.
Okay.
There's also Instagram and Facebook, and I've never done a Twitter in my life. So I'm gonna, if you don't mind, could you repost the questions?
No, the question is not written down yet.
Oh,
I have some
no
questions
problem.
here, yes. Yes.
Okay.
So my second question is on devotees. When you join, when we met Prabhupada, you have this faith when you were a teacher. But devotees are in contact with spiritual knowledge, yet we don't have such faith. So can you give us a little bit of why it's so that devotees don't have faith, even when they met, even when they see their guru face to face? Then you were not yet a disciple.
Well, Kusha, you're a very good, you do perfect questions also. We have something in common. It's a very good question. The question is, why don't devotees have faith? In Sanskrit, the word is called shraddha. And where does our heart go? And faith comes from humility. When we have humility and we're not so proud, we can develop faith. Part of it is philosophy, part of it is service, part of it is taste and realization. When all this combines together, we have faith. And when devotees are faithless, then there's a deficiency. Just like in this very chapter of the Bhagavatam, Vedas had become somewhat faithless. The real essence was devotional service, and he was dancing around it and not getting to the essence. So even though he was Veda Vyasa, literary incarnation, he'd become a little bewildered, but he was humble, surrendered to his guru, and then understood. In a similar way, if somebody is meeting Prabhupada, reading his books, and still not getting it, then they have to look in their heart. What's stopping me from understanding the obvious? And we can't change people's heart. We can give them good association. We can encourage. We can not preach too heavy. We can just try to encourage people. I saw when I was with Prabhupada, he was very encouraging. One time, I was in New York, and I didn't get initiated for several years until I met Prabhupada. I was following everything, chanting, but I wanted to get initiated at the right time. That's another story. I can tell it, but not to spend too much time. So I really wanted to, I was waiting, and some devotees at the New York temple I was in graduate school when I got back from India. So it was a little unusual. I was living outside. My apartment was used as a Sankirtan outpost. I mean, I was running a Krishna yoga club. So I was involved, but not in those days, everyone lived in an ashram, and I was a weirdo who did. So some people started preaching to me improperly, and they started saying, "What's wrong with you? What deep Maya that you're not living in the ashram and you're not surrendered entirely? What's wrong with you?"
Maya.
Yeah. So after a while, I started thinking there's something wrong with me. Now, not everyone was like that. Some devotees, I was friends with Gopal Krishna, who was Grahasta then, and he would never speak to me like that at all. We would have lunch all the time. And so some people were really good about it, but some people weren't so good about it. And they were very heavy with me on these points. So I started thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me. There's something very seriously wrong. So then Prabhupada was visiting New York. And the previous time he had visited, I was actually his driver. So I got to drive him from the airport back and forth. This time, I didn't want Prabhupada to see my face because I felt I'm too sinful. So Prabhupada was about to go into the temple room. I was in the hallway. So before he rounded the corner from his room to go down the hallway to the temple room, I hid in the corner of the hallway and offered obeisances so he couldn't see me. And I said the prayers very slow. You know how this goes. Nama Om Vishnu. Like that. So that by the time I would finish the prayer, Prabhupada would be in the temple room. And then I would just stick my head. It was so crowded. I'd just stick my head in the doorway to listen, because you can always fit one more head in the doorway. So then I didn't know, but somehow Prabhupada saw me, even though he didn't see my face, and he knew it was me. And Prabhupada stopped right next to me, and I didn't know it. And he was waiting and waiting. Finally, I said, well, everyone must be in the temple room now. I'll stand up. So when I stood up, there was Prabhupada 6 inches from me. And then he gave me a big hug. And Prabhupada didn't usually give big hugs. He gave me a big hug and said, so nice to see you. And I knew then that that was Krishna in my heart telling me that I am taking the right path. And Prabhupada said 150 times, Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. And I was just putting everything in order. Prabhupada himself took 10 years to get initiated. So that gave me the vindication I needed to know that I'm on the right path. And it gave me the way I deal with other people is I just try to encourage them. The worst thing we can do when we're reaching out to people is judge them. Oh, you're not this, you're not that. It chases everyone away, including me. Now, it doesn't mean that my mentors don't come and say, hey, Brahma, don't you think you ought to be reading a little more and running around less? People advise me, and I appreciate the advice, and I try to follow it. Don't you think you ought to take a break and go to India to a retreat? Yeah, you're right. I need to do that. I mean, I want advice. I want my mentors like Ritavaja Swami and others to give me some instructions, but the reason I love their instructions, they're never judging me. They're loving me and trying to help me. When Yamuna met me that night, she wasn't judging me. She was just appreciating. So when we act the way Prabhupada did with love, and we're offering love to people and they don't feel judged, then even if they don't have that much faith, it carries them along. And we start judging people, it just chases them away. Judge me, say, oh, Brahma, your tilak is not on very straight. 50 years hasn't been on straight. I can't figure that out. So it's just me. What can I do? I'm just clumsy. So what? So none of us want to be judged that way. Does
Why
that
do you
answer your
eat?
question?
Yes, Maharaj. They will ask you, why do you eat too much prasadam? You should eat little. I'm just there.
Too much prasad? Prabhupada said in the Gita, he quotes in the Gita, don't eat too much, don't eat too little. Don't sleep too much. Don't sleep too little. In the beginning days, Prabhupada would urge everyone to eat until they were stuffed and then eat some more. Later on, he would say, why are you eating so much? So it depends on the circumstances. So one man's food is another man's poison. So in the beginning, because we're so used to eating non-prasadam, you can't eat too much. But later on, we get mature. We have to stay healthy because mode of goodness is healthy. And if you eat too much, you get fat, you get diabetes, and you sleep too much, and you snore loud at night, so no one can be near you, and all these things happen. So we have to stay healthy. So eating
you,
too
Maharaj.
much will make us unhealthy.
Thank you, Maharaj. I want to ask you, what worries you most about your guru's mission, ISKCON?
That we don't get along with each other. I'm co-director of ISKCON Resolve, the conflict resolution arm for ISKCON. And the cases I do, the GBC Executive Committee assigns me very high-profile conflict cases that kind of take me a year to resolve. And these are senior devotees fighting over different things. And that's the biggest obstacle we have. There's an American comic strip that has a famous line in it, Pogo, if some of you know it, but the line goes like this: we have met the enemy. It is us. So we have met the enemy. It's us. So the fact that we don't get along with each other, we don't trust each other, is a real problem. I mean, we're human beings. I always like to say, I love humanity. It's people I have trouble with. And we have to be more trusting and loving with each other. That's the only obstacle that stops the movement from being successful. People get hung up on things. People, like, for example, people are hung up on the book changes. I'm very intimately involved. I was a mediator a year ago between the two sides on that. And to me, there's a lot of silliness. Did some of the editors, maybe they should have added footnotes or something? Yeah, probably so. But was there any ill intent? Was there any idea to change a philosophy? I know them all. No way. But devotees get real uptight and they attack each other and they flame on the internet. This is pure rubbish and nonsense. If somebody thinks the editors went too far, then talk to them, work it out. If they think they didn't go far enough, talk to them. Prabhupada loved his editors and gave them a lot of leeway. Now, after Prabhupada left and we edit, maybe we should start footnoting changes, something, you can do something to satisfy people. But the idea that we fight over these things, big internet battles, we have more important things to me, this is just silliness.
Okay, but this is your worry now that Prabhupada, you still have you are around, and your godbrothers and sisters are still around. What is your most worrying when no more Prabhupada disciple is on the planet about ISKCON?
Well, that's a smart question.
Because now we have many gurus with different disciples globally. Yeah. What happens to ISKCON?
Yeah, what happens to the unity of ISKCON? Well, Prabhupada, Giriraj Swami was called into Prabhupada's room at 2 a.m, not long before Prabhupada left the planet. And Prabhupada said, Giriraj Swami, how will the movement go on? And Prabhupada and Giriraj said, well, if we chant our rounds and follow the principles like that. And Prabhupada said, no. He said, you need intelligence and organization. In other words, you have to really, it's a movement. You have to run it intelligently. Otherwise, people will drift away. So it's really important while my generation's on the planet, we settle certain issues and set the standards in place. There's a lot of senior people feel that way, that it's very important we do that. So if my generation doesn't get past certain issues, your generation will have chaos. So we have a duty to do it. My part in it is twofold. I do conflict resolution, which is very dear to me, with my partner, Braja Bihari, who's senior to me in all things mediation, but we work together. In fact, he's driving Jai Advaita Swami to Gainesville today. He'll be here. And so it's important we learn how to speak to each other to resolve our conflicts. That's one thing. And the second thing I do is my interest is the intellectual community of ISKCON. Prabhupada said that he wanted to reach the intelligent class. So through the Bhaktivedanta Institute, I hope that we can reach out to the intelligent class and show them that Krishna consciousness really is a science that works. And so that's, you might say, is how I do it. Other devotees are very dedicated to restructuring the GBC to be more responsive. We have a very brilliant chair of the GBC now, Ramai Swami. I wish he could stay on for years. He's so good at what he does, really good. And then we have other devotees working to put succession in place. So somehow Lord Chaitanya has blessed this movement in spite of us. Like I said, we have met the enemy. It's us.
Thank you, Maharaj. I will give chance to someone else to ask question. Maharaj is here today with us. Everybody here will ask question, one question each.
Yeah.
We go to Bhaktivedanta Academy.
And
Sukadev
remember, there are no bad questions.
Yes. Sukadev Goswami, unmute yourself and ask your one question. Radhakund Devidase, get prepared for your question. Saleka Prabhu, get prepared for your question, please. Saleka, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
I wish more.
Hare Krishna.
First, I want to offer my respect to the Vedas state. I'm very grateful that we have opportunity to hear from you. Some of us have not had the opportunity to go around the ISKCON world. So this platform has given us an opportunity to meet several of the Prabhupada's disciples, and we're grateful for this opportunity. Maharaj, the one question that came to my mind as Prabhu was, the question is, you said something very touchy when Krishna Prabhu asked you a question. That what is that troubles or bothers you more when you think about the disciple of the power, or you talk about how we're not cooperating with each other? And that's very touching because disciple of Bhakti Maharaj, and one of the challenges that we've been battling with in West Africa, we don't have so many of the gurus here, maybe 3 or 4, but the challenges of not being able to work together among the disciples, even of the same guru, is in a very big challenge. So my question would be, for one who is sincerely wishing that we could have this kind of a strong bond that is within Srila Prabhupada's disciples, because we see that Srila Prabhupada's disciples, even though when they have differences, still somehow or the other, they're able to move the movement forward. But I'm not saying that here in this part of the world. What can we do?
You've asked probably one of the best questions of how to move the movement forward. You really asked the question. Well, there's several things that can be done. As far as Bhakti Tirtha Swami goes, he and I were friends from the days he was Ganesham. In fact, one time when I was a graduate student in 1973 or 4, I saw him at a Sunday feast. He says, I want to go to your university and distribute books. I said, great, I'll meet you at my graduate student office such and such a time. So he shows up. And he opens his briefcase and pulls out an afro wig, you know, like an afro haircut, they call it. He pulls it out and he's putting it on. I said, "What are you doing?" In those days, because of civil rights movement, he said, "If I walk in a suit and tie and an afro wig, they can never say no to me." And he sold them a whole standing order of books. He was so smart, so practical, and personally so austere. He was one of my favorite people. And we would have these wonderful talks. I just still can't believe he's gone. It's very, very, very painful. And he moved. Sometimes he was very unfairly attacked by his godbrothers, like, for example, wearing African clothes. Come on. Prabhupada said dress isn't very important. There he is in Africa, and he's trying to win over Africans. So naturally you wear African clothes. I mean, it's a no-brainer that if he's going to a formal African function, he's going to do the needful. When I'm in Vrindavan, you know, I put on a dhoti because that's what people expect. When I'm with the scientists, I don't wear a dhoti. They don't expect that. Srup Damodar Maharaj didn't wear it. So you do what's practical. So he was very practical. And he was bitterly attacked for some of the things he did. And I was really pained by it. I asked him about it. And he said, yeah, it really hurts his heart. But he says he didn't take offense. I took offense seeing him attacked, but he didn't take offense. They just don't understand. I mean, he was deeply hurt. He revealed his mind to me, how much it hurts, but he didn't take an offense. He understood they're trying to serve Prabhupada, I am, and they just don't understand me. So the solution is mutual understanding. And Bhakti Tirtha Swami taught me that, taught it to me very dramatically. When I was in conflict with another senior leader, he stepped in the middle to resolve it. And even though I do conflict resolution, sometimes I have a conflict. I'm human. And he stepped in the middle. And what he did is he listened. He just listened to what my concern was. And then just by him hearing what my concern was, it somehow went away. And I was able to make peace. And it was an incredible ability. So sometimes, unless someone is horribly offensive, in which we have to walk away, when somebody is horribly offensive, I don't listen, I just walk away. But somebody has a complaint or a concern, I try to listen, understand, yeah, this is a real concern. And try to remember, you can butter a chapati on both sides. So there's always more than one side to any story. The second thing you can do is form a conflict resolution department in Nigeria. I know in South Africa we have one now because Braj Bihari does training there every week. And we have in Europe and Eastern Europe and China and South America, certainly in America. So you can form a conflict resolution. ISKCON Resolve will train you. We'll send you to conflict resolution school, either in person or online. We even have a budget to help with these things to a limited extent. And then you need somebody within your Sangha who's trained in conflict resolution, who is neutral, who is absolutely confidential and trusted. And that person can then help bring peace. Because when there's a conflict, it means we don't trust each other. But if the people in conflict trust the middle person, then we can bridge the gap. So I would say if you're feeling that way, you're in Nigeria, Prabhu?
Yes, madam.
Yeah, so you need a conflict resolution department in Nigeria. And you can write me separate. I'll put you in touch with Braja Bihari. We'll train. You may be the person we train. I can tell just looking at your face that you have the right nature. You have to have the right nature, otherwise you can't do this service. If you have the right nature, and then you can be trained in the details, which aren't very hard to learn. But if you don't have the right nature, we can train you day and night and you still won't get it.
Actually, Maharaj, we need that conflict resolution for the region called West Africa. not just Nigeria,
Okay.
because we have a regional administration. So everything we do through region. So maybe many temples will bring one or two devotees to do the training. We will talk to our regional secretary, Shivas Das Fanachari. He will
That's even
organize
better.
that.
That's even better. Oh, I like that better. Who's the GBC there?
Kavichandra Swami and Bhakti Damodara Swami.
Okay.
And also Shivas Das Fanachari, 3 of them.
Okay. And they'll all be in favor of this. I know them. They'll all be in favor. So you can discuss with them. They can discuss with Braja Bihari or myself, and we would form a West African conflict resolution. See, in West Africa, internal in the countries, there's a lot of conflict. I mean, there's a rebellion right now in Central African Republic, I think, and there's all kinds in Nigeria. There's different kinds of conflict. So there's a lot of regional conflict. And in America, there's so much conflict between Republicans and Democrats now. They hate each other with a passion. So as devotees, we have to be like the lotus flower, a little bit above it, and then people will appreciate us. So it's really important that we resolve our own internal conflicts. Otherwise, we're preaching one thing and doing something quite different. Very, very important. And that was Prabhupada's final instruction, was how much you love me is by how well you work together.
Thank you, Maharaj, because I really love the idea you mentioned that the conflict resolution can be done online or physically, because we have been having some seminars on this Zoom platform. Also, if required, like you mentioned, there are some economic or financial support to train physically. Prabhu Shivas will get in touch with you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Yes, no problem. Thank you. Our next question is from Sukadev Goswami from Mauritius. Sukadev, unmute. Put on your camera. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very, very much for the wonderful discourse. I've been listening and I've been very, very touched by most of what you've been saying. I have a question, Maharaj. I kind of like I have series of questions, but according to the platform, we ask one question, and then consequently we continue. So my question is in regards to devotees. Basically, we do know, so many of us, our background before and after we take to Krishna consciousness, it's different. Like itself just changed a whole lot for us, like comparing to when we started or from where we started from. But in the process of us coming into Krishna consciousness, we do get carried away by so many other things that maybe sometimes are not so very Krishna conscious, but just because we feel it is part of what is there in the Vedas. Like when we come to Krishna consciousness, we feel that anything that is in the Vedas is accepted, as in Krishna consciousness, So, and based on this, we get carried away, and also sometimes we get influenced by other kind of activities that is followed in India. Activities that are followed in India, we get kind of like influenced by this, and in one way or the other, we try to mix this together with our Krishna consciousness. My question is, how do we stay aloof without being influenced by so many things we see in India, by so many kind of lifestyle we see in India, or by so many things that is written in the Vedas, and not what is there in Srila Prabhupada's books?
Well, you've asked an extremely important question. Very, very important. Give me an example of one thing that you're talking about.
Well, let's say, for example, me as an example, coming from Nigeria, the way of lifestyle in Nigeria is not the way of lifestyle in India. Like wearing dhoti and kota is not like, it's more of like an Indian kind of an attire. But when we come to Krishna consciousness, we feel like, okay, this is it. So we adopt it and we take it seriously. Okay, this is what it has to be. Or if this is not there, it is nothing else again. So this is
Okay.
just a little example.
That's a good example. Prabhupada said many times, I have all these quotes, that the dress is not very important. At one point, he said, I never asked you to wear a dhoti. And devotees started doing it because they were imitating Prabhupada. Then Prabhupada understood that in the culture of the 60s, especially a lot of devotees coming from hippies, you needed some uniform to identify us. So the dhoti worked. So Prabhupada then encouraged the dhoti simply not because it's a Bengali village clothes, which is what it is, simply because it worked. So Prabhupada's point is utility is the principle. So if wearing a dhoti works, wear a dhoti. If wearing African clothes work, wear African clothes. If wearing a suit and tie works, wear that. When I was in Vrindavan, I'll bring the picture back up a second. No, I turned the picture off. I showed you that picture from the Life Comes from Life conference. And in that conference, I was wearing suits and ties. Prabhupada told us to. So one night we went into Prabhupada's room and he wanted our Sankirtan scores. Now Prabhupada eyesight was, even though the room was dark, he had to wear dark glasses due to his extreme illness. And he didn't see very well at all. So when we went in the room, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, Prabhupada, your scientists are here. They're wearing suits and ties. Prabhupada said, very good, but get them chairs. He didn't want us to sit on the floor. Of course, the problem was there weren't enough. Oh, there it is. Thank you. There weren't enough chairs. And so 3 of us sat on one chair somehow, and the other 2 of us squatted down, pretending we were on a chair, knowing Prabhupada couldn't see that well. We want to follow his order. So it's kind of funny seed. You imagine we're just pretending we're on chairs because we didn't want to disobey Prabhupada, but we want to follow his order. So Prabhupada was very happy the way we dressed. When Sri Damodar Maharaj would meet scientists, he was dressed beautifully. When he did the Manipur dancers, he dressed a different way. So we do what's practical. If we insist that, as I said, when Krishna appeared 5,000 years ago, he said the science was lost. So when we go to India and we say modern Indian culture represents the Vedas, it's almost silly. I'll give you an example. One of the favorite dishes of devotees is halava. But halava is a word from the Islamic culture. It's a Mideast word. It's not even an Indian word. Sorry, also like that. These words are not even from Sanskrit. So we're saying that this is all Vedic. Our goal is not to become Hindus. That's what Prabhupada's first line was, we went to Vrindavan. Our goal is to bring Krishna. If dressing in a dhoti helps, dress in a dhoti. Dressing in a suit and tie helps. Now, when we're doing our ritual work in a temple, we have uniforms. So we're going on the altar, we're going to wear a dhoti because that's our ecclesiastical clothing. Every religion has it. The priests wear collars, the rabbis wear a shawl, the imams wear a certain hat and certain clothes. So every religion typically has ecclesiastical clothing. I have no objection that we use ecclesiastical clothing from the India tradition, but that is for deity worship. When we're out dealing with the public, we should wear what's most effective. And that is what Prabhupada said. And those who say differently are not really understanding the mood of Prabhupada. They might be very sincere. I said earlier that everybody needs culture. We need death rituals. We need marriage rituals. We all need some religion to work with our spirituality. But Bhakti Siddhanta said that religion becomes the enemy of spirituality. That's Bhakti Siddhanta speaking, not me. So if religion, we want to avoid religion become the enemy of spirituality, but we need some religion. So how to make a balance so we're not off balance? It's very difficult. So you've asked a very good question. I've given you a complicated answer because it's not simple. It's just not simple. But your question is very well focused. And we just have to do what's best. And some more liberal devotees would be quite opposed to devotees. And the conservatives say, if you're not wearing a dhoti, you're in Maya. I think I'm in Maya. But when I'm in Vrindavan, I wear a dhoti when I give class.
I remember from your perfect questions, perfect answers, the same question was asked to Srila Prabhupada, and his answer was, the dress is not important, but it's helpful.
Yes. Yes. He said it's not very important. And he said it many times, not just to me. So if somebody says dress, and Rupa Goswami clears this up in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I think it's chapter 5 or 6. I don't recall now. He clears it up very well. He said there are principles of devotional service and details. And the Kanishta devotee, the immature devotee, mixes up the details with the principles. And they say the detail is your tilak straight is more important than are you chanting with your heart. And so when somebody mixes up details and principles, then they're not following Rupa Goswami. There are principles. You accept a guru. That's a principle. You chant Hare Krishna. That's a principle. Now the detail might be I'm chanting on a japa bead, or maybe due to my circumstances, I have to use a clicker. That's a detail. I remember some years ago, one senior devotee was chanting on a clicker, and there were people spent hundreds of hours criticizing him for it. What a waste of time. He was traveling, his hands were full, and that was practical. So he did what was practical. Very, very senior devotee. Wonderful. I tell you who it is, Jayapataka Swami, who is one of my great heroes in the world. I mean, I know him and love him. I've known him since the 70s. And people were, I think, we have a whole movement to spread. Don't you have anything else to do than criticize somebody? Prabhupada said there are no hard and fast rules for chanting. Now, I like chanting on beads because I like the feel of the beads. I like it. But sometimes when I'm traveling, a clicker is more practical for me. So I have my clicker. But I have a dozen clickers because they break often. So I always keep a spare one with me. So it depends on the principle is chant Hare Krishna. The detail is, what am I wearing? You know, what the nature of my beads? The principle is hear the holy name.
Thank you, Maharaj. We have Ganga Prashad was raising his hand up. Ganga Prashad, if you're around, please unmute.
Okay. And just so you know, in 7 minutes, it's noon here, and I have to go to another program. So
all right,
we'll wrap up. But I love being in Africa. In fact, if I was there now, I'd ask to borrow some of your African clothes. I think it's so cool.
Okay. Okay. But I want to, since before you go, I will ask you, we have 16 January to 20th available if you would like to give class again.
Of course. Of course. I mean, I can't describe to you the honor it is for me to be in Africa. I mean, it's something I always wanted to do. And, you know, Bhakti Tirtha Swami, Brahmananda, they used to tell me all these stories. And I said, a place that's so rich in culture, so misunderstood, and the people there naturally understand, just naturally, that there are devas who control the world. Just like the American Indians, they understand immediately that there are devas. You don't have to convince anybody there's higher power. In Africa, you don't have to convince people of a lot of things. They already know it. Like in the West, you know, we believe, oh, our computer tells everything. So there's something very, very wonderful about African culture, but somehow, as my life has never taken me there. I'm looking at that week. I'm pretty Yeah, I'm pretty free that time. You know, I don't travel hardly anywheres anymore. Just
Okay,
visit
I will
my
send you
patients.
email and you can choose a date.
Yeah. Well, and just tell me what to speak on. I'll have to think of new jokes though. I can't recycle the ones from today.
You know you have.
Okay, thank you very much. We give the mic to Ganga Prasad.
Haribol Ganga Prasad.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna Maharaj, obeisances at your lotus feet. All glories to Guru and Goranga, Guru Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very much for the privilege of blessing our platform. My question is in line with the last question asked. I read in one book called Fortunate Soul, the Fortunate Soul's lack of information. And part of it is mentioned in terms of preaching and principles. You have to comply the laws of the environment, of the land. We are having little issues now, and I think I need your input.
I think we lost him, did we?
Waking up.
Yeah, I couldn't understand him because it kept every other word would break up.
Yeah.
Maybe he can put the question in the chat because he has a weak connection, and he can leave the video off and put the question in the chat, and I could read it.
Ganga, please.
That may be
you can
weak.
write it down. We take from Ranti Adepoju. Ranti, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, my Dandava Pranam to you, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
It's so great, and it's my honor to really witness today's lecture. Although like it's quite busy, but I was quite glad I joined later. So my question goes thus: like I want to ask a question in relation to this Prabhu from Mauritius, like was actually asking about like probably integrating the culture, like probably like the dhoti might not be so important, like wearing it as a devotional attire, stuff like that. So I want to ask the same, like can the deities be offered like African delicacy, like like apple, like we have.
I was waiting for that question. A very good question, and it comes down to: should we offer the deities pakora or pizza?
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Like there have been several arguments why like some pujaris are like, oh, these are the deities, they eat only puris and parathas and stuff like that. You shouldn't offer them like all this African delicacy stuff like that because like they are from India.
Prabhupada said several times we can use native foodstuffs. For example, some things Prabhupada would eat, I wouldn't eat because I can't digest it. There's certain oils. My body, I got attacked in India by various microbes, and that ruined my ability to eat fried food. So I can't eat fried food. So I can't do a pakora. I get sick. So that's a personal thing with me. But what we offer the deities, I think we offer, Krishna says in the Gita, if you offer me with love, a flower, leaf, water, I accept it. So the important point is not what we offer. We offer with love. But if we're offering with love, we should be offering, for example, if I was at your home and you said, well, what would you like to eat? You asked me. And I said, well, I would like some steamed vegetables. And instead you gave me fried pakoras. You wouldn't be doing me any good because I can't eat the fried pakoras. So in a similar way, we should offer Krishna what Krishna likes with flower, leaf, water. As far as using local African food, it's all vegetarian. It's our standard. I see nothing wrong with that. But some people might not like it. It's what's called a detail of devotional service, not a principle. So the details are circumstantial. So one temple, the pujari may feel, oh, I have to do just Indian. Another, I have to do African. There's no right or wrong answer. It all depends, because Rupa Goswami says it's a detail that varies with time, place, and circumstances. It's not worth arguing over. If my pujari insists on chapatis, so let him offer chapatis. Aesop's has a fable, and in this fable, he described these brothers who are fighting, and he compares it to sticks. If anyone can take one stick and just break it like that, but if you have a bundle of sticks, no one, no matter how strong you are, you can't break it. So in a similar way, if we work together, no one can break us. I'm saying this is not an issue worth arguing over. My own opinion is, yeah, African food would be wonderful to offer. I like the idea. In Mexico, I would expect them to offer tacos. And I get that. In Israel, they'll offer bagels. I get that. It all has to be cooked with love, devotion, proper ingredients. But if some pujari feels very strongly it has to be Indian food, it's not worth arguing over. That's
yes, Maharaj. Sorry, Ganga Prasad have written his question on the chat room.
I see it. Please make an input on the concept of cremation and burial, as our environment is contending with cremation and our devotees end up being buried. Again, this is local custom. Cremation is environmentally more friendly. We're not wasting land. Personally, my will says I'll be cremated, but in certain countries, the custom is burial. And if, the parents and grandparents would be very concerned, it's a detail. It's not a principle of devotional service. It can vary with time, place, and circumstances. So I plan to get cremated when my parents passed on, with them buried, because that's what my brothers wanted. I didn't fight it. I went to my mother's funeral, and the casket was open, and I sprinkled Ganges water on her head. And the next person walks up to the open casket and shrieks loudly, "Oh my God, she's sweating." So anyway, cremation's more practical that way. So these things happen, but it's a detail. It's not a principle. Yeah, I want to be cremated. Somebody wants to be buried, let them be buried. The important point is that we help people die properly. The death rate is 100%, except for me. We all think like that, but it really is 100%. So when people are dying, we have to help. There's a lot of devotees are studying hospice care, death doulas, learning the art of helping people die. And it's very, when I was young in the movement and Jayananda died, it was shocking. We couldn't imagine somebody dying. Now, Burajan Prabhu put it this way after Bhakti Charu Swami left. He said, now we have entered the decade of tears. Because, people, when Bhakti Charu Swami died, it was like, we were friends. It was like, oh my God. It's kind of shocking. When Bhakti Tirtha Swami died, I mean, we knew he was going to die, so I was prepared for it, but it was too shocking for me. When Tamal Krishna Maharaj died, I cried every day for a year. And like I said, I don't cry a lot, but every day for a year. So it's difficult. We have to, our business is part of our key business is to help people die. And if they get buried or cremated, whatever they want, who cares? The main thing is to help them die. Then what happens to the body? We do this ritual or that ritual. We have to do something. But it's not very important to argue over.
Thank you, Maharaj, for your wonderful class. And we kindly ask our devotees, because Maharaj has another program to attend to. He will come again in January by his grace.
I love you people. Yeah, you guys are wonderful. I mean, the questions are something. I give classes. I never gave classes all over the world until COVID. Now I give classes all over the world. I was giving last week in West Virginia, and then I was giving in Puerto Rico, and then in England, and yesterday in India. And this Zoom has proved to be, I feel like Sanjay now. It's very powerful. So Krishna has given us a tool to use in his service, and I'm so glad to be of service. All of that said, it is my wish one day to actually physically visit Africa. There's a few countries that I have a desire to visit: Nigeria, Kenya. I want to go to Ethiopia for various reasons, and there's some countries that really are of great interest to me. I'm a historian. I love reading history. And these countries have such a fascinating history that I can learn a lot from these cultures. So the idea of visiting Africa is very attractive to me, but we'll see. It's all as Krishna arranges. There's a bus company in America called Greyhound Bus. I don't know if you heard of it or not, but it's the bus line that goes from one city to another. And they have a very spiritual motto. Brilliant, brilliant spiritual motto. Has anybody here ever taken a Greyhound bus when you're in America? Maybe not. Their motto is so good. Their motto is this: take the bus and leave the driving to us. Very clever. And that's Krishna consciousness. We get on this bus and then we depend on Krishna. We got to choose the right bus. And once we choose the right bus, then we leave the rest to Krishna. So that's how I view things. Thank you very much. You've been one of my all-time favorite audiences to speak to.
Yeah, we ask our devotees to kindly unmute yourselves and let's chant Hare Krishna for Maharaj for coming.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare